Hi everyone, I'm Gwyneth Talley. I'll be reviewing a book for an example for our World Ethnography project, and today I'm going to be talking about Everyday Life in Global Morocco by Rachel Newcomb. Okay, so how do people around the world encounter globalization in their daily lives? Since the publication of Shana Cohen's Searching for a Different Future, The Rise of Global Middle Class in Morocco, this was published in 2004, there's been little ethnographic evidence for understanding how globalization affects the average urban Moroccan family. So with internet usage growing, importation of international goods, and Moroccans immigrating for work in foreign countries, Rachel Newcomb follows one middle-class family in Fez and how they address globalization in their daily lives. This ethnography of urban middle class demonstrates how Fezis are constantly reevaluating, reconstituting, and adapting their values and ideas in the grip of globalization in Morocco. So a little bit about Rachel Newcomb, the author of this book. This is not her first book. She's also written Women of Fez. She's a professor of anthropology at Rollins College and a co-editor of the book Encountering Morocco, Fieldwork and Cultural Understanding, published in 2013. The author was born and raised in North America but has spent numerous years in Morocco and married a Moroccan. She flawlessly demonstrated her familiarity and knowledge of Moroccan life in her first monograph, the one I mentioned, Women of Fez, published in 2009. And as Doyle Hatt referred to Newcomb's first monograph, there is no hint of exotic in Newcomb's Fez. So when you're looking as an anthropologist to ethnographies, you really want to understand how Fez looks on the ground to someone who's familiar with it. You don't want this kind of Western lens clouding it and exoticizing Morocco. So she really does an excellent job, both in Women of Fez and Everyday Life in Global Morocco, of really giving you the nitty-gritty without a feeling of Orientalism. So Newcomb's book moves from Cohen, again, her initial theorizing of global middle class, to giving prime examples of how average Moroccans confront the continual collision of traditional life and globalized expectations. Using vignettes from the Benjeloun family to illustrate the effects of globalization on marriage and reproduction, labor, diet, and urban life in the Ville Nouvelle of Fez, she demonstrates how Moroccans manage typical dilemmas. So by spending extensive time with the family, the author argues that everyday life has changed on a local, national, and global level. Yet these changes are subtle. So some interactions feel like direct clashes, while others are a result of chain reactions, which theorized globalization doesn't address. So only lived realities can demonstrate these issues. Newcomb seeks to illustrate how people all over the world encounter, engage, and navigate globalization in locally and culturally specific ways. So she has 5 main chapters, minus the introduction and conclusion, and she focuses on themes of transnational suspicions, reproduction, labor, food consumption, changing diet, and finally urban living. So while seemingly arbitrary, they are the most primary issues that Newcomb found affected the Benjelouns the most, rather than concentrating on her original fieldwork focusing on like feminism and women and gender. So by focusing on just one family, she efficiently demonstrates the deep-rooted effects of globalization. So the book's first and strongest chapter, which I will read from in a little bit, follows Rashid's trials and tribulations of his marriage to and subsequent divorce from Nejma, a seemingly pious Moroccan woman living in Texas. The couple meets online, they proceed to Skype and call each other, and eventually this leads to an engagement. When the Benjeloun family meets the future in-laws in Casablanca, they encountered incident after incident which quickly demonstrated the tensions of what was expected and the lack of cordial familial relations. The marriage fell apart shortly after the honeymoon, during which Nejma demanded luxurious hotels and shopping. Nejma had assumed the wealth of Rashid's family based on the family name and Fezi origins. And Benjeloun also as a name is a name of a very famous Moroccan fiction author as well. So Nejma hurriedly returned to the States and began divorce proceedings. After several $1,000s, many trips to court, and frequent appeals to reconcile, they were divorced. Nejma used the new 2004 Mudawana, or the Family Law Code, which ensures more rights for women, including the right to instigate divorce on the grounds of discord to her advantage. So the chapter examines the intricacies of Moroccan marriages and expectations and the subsequent challenges and changes happening to the institution, since women are just as frequently migrating as men. So traditional family arranged marriages to people within the same cities are now shifting to men and women choosing their own partners in Morocco and abroad, leading to a myriad of new problems. So, Newcomb acknowledges how the global image of modern Morocco is of a liberal and progressive Muslim society, when in reality there's enormous social problems such as lack of significant rights for single women, the social blame put on women for premarital sexual activity, and the lack of acknowledgement of children born out of wedlock. So the subsequent chapters follow Hanan's journey to become pregnant, accompany the woman to traditional healers in hopes of helping her conceive a child, and that's chapter 2. In chapter 3, Newcomb focuses on the labor of two brothers, one a successful businessman who sells secondhand clothes, and others who sit in cafes waiting for work. Chapter 4 focuses on the pressures of cooking for the global family and their changing tastes and schedules. And finally, chapter 5 focuses on the brother that resists the gentrification of his neighborhood. And these tableaus leave the reader feeling like they're part of the family while understanding the subtler impacts of global influence, which makes it a very powerful ethnographic work. The main strength of this book is Newcomb's vivid, in-depth window into a large Fezzi family. Her style blends anthropological and historical knowledge and fieldwork into a digestible text that continues to follow the writing against culture, as Laila Ablougod focuses on, as a standard that we've come to expect from her. The accessibility of Newcomb's style makes the recondite language of other scholars unpalatable for a few days after reading this, meaning I really want to just keep reading Newcomb's style again and again and again. So the subtleties and complications of her participants make them individuals, not broad generalizations. And her interwoven bits of dialogue of men and women she speaks with give the reader a fly-on-the-wall perspective, as if we're the anthropologists of the anthropologists in situ. So we're just going to be listening the entire time to this. And when I read through my portion in the book, I think you'll really feel that as well. So each chapter vividly illustrates the person and enables the reader to empathize with the problems they face. And the first 3 thematic chapters are the strongest, focusing on extremely nuanced examples of the Benjeloun siblings through marriage, reproduction, and labor in the globalized society. So the one thing Newcomb doesn't really touch on is kind of globalization in relation to technology, especially with the consistent use of cyber cafes, smartphones, global media, and internet. And she mentions things like Skype for communication, internet usage, the media, and the impact. But you don't really talk too much about it in the book, and that's okay. That's not exactly what she plans to do, nor is there a whole lot of information available on this right now. There's growing understanding of expansion of fiber optics and 4G, but it is a large part of globalization that she misses, but that's okay. The book is intended to serve as an ethnographic example of globalization. Although Newcomb misses the opportunity to talk about the internet, that's fine. The introduction sets the stage for her filling the gap of ethnographic examples of globalization affecting a group of people while not offering a full critique on some previous theories of globalization, which makes it very palatable if you want to introduce it to undergraduates. So overall, this book is a unique and well-written ethnographic addition to the dialogue on globalization and modern Morocco. And this work would be used for future classes of anthropology of globalization, history of Morocco, and urban anthropology. So I think this text would also be of wider interest to diplomats, journalists, and NGOs. Anyone who works in Morocco to really address and understand some of the issues Newcomb highlights. So I think this is one of the best, kind of newest ethnographies to come out of Morocco, and I'm very excited to read a portion of it with you. So the vignette I'm going to focus on in this case, I'm going to look at Newcomb's discussion in her vignette on the end of the Mediterranean diet, which starts on page 101. Consume, the end of the Mediterranean diet, chapter 4. 1995. Latifa roused her daughter Ilham from sleep just as the sun was brightening over the rooftop of their 3-story apartment building in the center of the Fez. Rubbing sleep from her eyes, Ilham followed her mother into the small kitchen where she put a pot of water on the 2-burner stove for tea and hot chocolate. Ilham threw a jellaba over her pajamas, stepping into plastic slippers that would take her a few doors down to the Hanout, the small dry goods shop that she and her mother visited multiple times a day. There she handed the grocer a few dirham and received a baguette and 2 round loaves of bread. Back in the kitchen, Latifa, Ilham, and her sister Hanan piled the breakfast tray with bread, small dishes of butter and apricot jam, and thermoses filled with tea and hot chocolate. As the sun poured into the room, they woke their other siblings, the boys who slept in the smaller of the two salons, where they would all eat breakfast. Latifa's husband, Si Mohammed, exited their master bedroom and joined the children at the breakfast table. Noise from the television, tuned to one of the 3 Moroccan stations available to them, filled the room, and the Benjamin children scrambled to eat their breakfast and get ready for school or work. All except Ilham were out of the house and on their way an hour later. Ilham, who was 18, planned to marry the next year, stayed home with her mother. After they washed the breakfast dishes and put them away, Ilham and Latifa picked up woven straw bags and began their 10-minute walk to the Marché Central, or the Central Market. A honeycomb of market stalls located in the center of the Ville Nouvelle. Each stall was heaped with baskets of red onions, carrots, tomatoes, lettuce, and potatoes, but also with fruits and vegetables particularly to the season. Cantaloupes and watermelon in the summer, oranges in winter, apples from the Middle Atlas Mountains in the fall. The women bantered with their favorite sellers, choosing from among the different stalls the produce that looked best that day. Then they climbed the steps to the center of the market, where the offerings were more diverse, ranging from pet parakeets, goldfish, to spices. Glistening fish trucked in from the coast fresh on Tuesdays and Saturdays lay on stone slabs in one central area. They examined the fish and decided they'd wait for a fresher supply before preparing le choub le tamamtim, baked fish with a lemony cilantro sauce and tomatoes. Bypassing the meat stalls where hunks of beef and lamb hung from hooks behind the butchers, they headed for the chicken seller closest to the exit, for whom they bought a young capon. Bags laden with food, the 2 women walked home to begin cooking the family lunch. Although Latifa's daughters were always helped her around the house, it was not until marriage preparations for Ilham began in earnest that Latifa started to work on transferring her knowledge of Moroccan cuisine to her daughter. Hanan, who was 23 and had a job teaching in a primary school, knew how to make the basics, but she had just finished college and was not ready to marry yet. Now Ilham was learning how to prepare labor-intensive dishes like pastilla, the chicken, almond, and cinnamon-filled pie, her mother's favorite tagines, and hand-rolled couscous. She would learn how to use every part of a newly killed sheep during Eid al-Kabir, the Feast of the Sacrifice, and how to make dishes like sharia nufuna, buried noodles, in which noodles are successfully steamed over broth and then served with chicken and powdered cinnamon and sugar mixture. Her mother wrote nothing down, transmitting her knowledge orally and through gestures, Ilham following Latifa's commands and visually memorizing how much paprika or ginger to add to this dish or to that and at what point. After months of instruction, Ilham was able to prepare her mother's dishes as well as Latifa could, and would enter her husband's household ready to cook for her new family, reflecting honor on her parents who had raised her so well. In 2013, Fez had spent millions of dirhams on the beautification campaign that is most obvious on the main routes into and out of the city. A toll highway now connects the city with Rabat, and thousands of high-rise apartments have mushroomed, the city now sprawling out into areas that had recently been farmland. In the city center, the Grand Boulevard Hassan II has been completely transformed with fountains, a general garden, and blinking lights that extend the palm tree-lined avenue almost to the ancient Medina. Yet Mohammed V Avenue, the other central artery of which one finds the central market, is in disrepair, its cobbled sidewalks missing stones here and there, barely able to support traffic that pours into it during rush hour. The central market itself is falling apart. Many of the stalls are empty, with wire netting over naked stall fronts, where only dust-covered wooden tables remain. Some of the same salesmen who were known to Latifa and her family are still present, though many whisper that the city is attempting to freeze them out for being unseemly amid all the cosmetic renovations. Fires have damaged one wing of the market, and in its margins emaciated stray cats wind their way among fish bones and rotting garbage that sometimes does not get picked up by the city's new industrial garbage collection company. Latifa is now widowed, her children grown. The family apartment in the center of town will soon be torn down and replaced with luxury high-rise where single-family apartments will sell for 800,000 dirham or more, the equivalent of $80,000. The developers have compensated residents with approximately 20,000 per family, which Latifa uses to keep an apartment in the neighborhood on the outskirts of town close to the highway. Ilham, now the mother of 2 children, lives in an affordable suburb about 10 minutes' drive from the city center. Latifa alternates among her children's residences, but spends much of her time with Ilham's family. When they shop, it is at one of the many new supermarkets located on the outskirts of the city, easily reachable by car through the difficult by public transportation and impossible on foot. The most prominent among these is the European-style Marjan, which has 3 locations in Fez. Marjan has everything from televisions to canned tomatoes, multiple varieties of breakfast cereal, and the entire aisle dedicated to packaged cookies. Of course, what Marjane carries is specific to the Moroccan market and mirrors what can also be found in the small dry goods shops still on every street. There are different types of couscous, nor bouillon cubes for flavoring tagines, house dresses, plastic flip-flops, and buckets for the hammam, public steam baths. There are even pre-made jarred tagine sauces. In the production section, customers select fruits and vegetables, fill plastic bags, and then take them to be weighed by an attendant. There is a bakery and a deli counter for cheese, lunch meats, and even pork. There is beer, wine, and a liquor room, ostensibly for foreigners, though it is not uncommon to see well-dressed professional Moroccans filling their carts with wine. The supermarket is clean, brightly lit warehouse, and it is a social event to shop there or even just walk around buying nothing. Latifa and Ilham shop there together on the weekends, Ilham driving the small family Fiat. Ilham's 15-year-old son and 10-year-old daughter come too and are rewarded for their good behavior with packages of cookies. Rather than shopping every day as they used to, they've learned to stock up on groceries. The meat is cleaner there, they say, refrigerated and already cut up, rather than hacked apart by a butcher's table in the central market, where the temperatures in the summer can be 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Food is still central to the family experience, but with crucial differences from a generation earlier. Ilham and Latifa still prepare a Moroccan lunch together for the family, though daughter Sarah eats her lunch at school, and Ilham's husband Brahim, a bank employee, works from 7 a.m. until 3 p.m. and does not come home until later, when he eats his tagine by himself in front of the television before going out to a cafe with his friends. Ilham worries about him. In his early 50s, he has developed the hereditary diabetes that has plagued other members of his family, yet he never seems to have time to take walks or exercise. Government offices and banks now follow a European schedule, abandoning the old custom where offices were shut down from noon until 2 p.m. for lunch. At a typical lunch, we usually find the two women and Ilham's son, Samir, who often refuses the tagine and wants a panini sandwich instead, with cheese and a natural pink lunch meat substitute known as cachet, grilled on white bread and accompanied by a bag of potato chips. When Sarah comes home from school, she often eats something similar, or just a package of cookies while she watches television. Ilham shrugs, saying, "It's just the way kids are these days. It's just a modern life," she tells me. Okay, so I hope I made you salivate a little bit with those pictures while I was reading that vignette. But that's just a small, pardon the pun, taste of what Rachel Newcomb really brings to life in her book, and I think it's really telling as you go through it, and even just listening to that small vignette of how globalization is really affecting them through the urban sprawl, the different foods available, the utilization of grocery stores on a much bigger scale. And I think this is a really great ethnography if you're just curious about kind of Morocco nowadays. So one of my favorite ethnographies of all time, check it out. Rachel Newcomb's ethnography, Everyday Life in Global Morocco. And thanks for tuning in. This has been part of the World Ethnography Project. Thanks so much.